Welcome to the Girlfriend Book Club's monthly discussion. I'm Shelley Emling, the editor of the Girlfriend newsletter. I'm also the moderator of the Girlfriend Book Club. I'm so pleased that the Girlfriend Book Club's 40,000 plus members chose The Last House on the Street as our March book club pick. And tonight, I'm also so pleased that we have the author with us, Diane Chamberlain. She's the author of more than 20 best-selling novels. And I told her before we came on the air that this is unusual because her book, Big Lies in a Small Town, was one of our Girlfriend Book Club picks. I don't know if you guys remember, but in 2020. And so she's the first author that's ever been the author of our monthly book club pick 2 times. So this is so exciting. And so welcome. We're so happy to have you, Diane Chamberlain.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm really thrilled that 2 of my books have been selections. That is so cool.
Yes, as I said to you before, I never know what the 40,000 members are going to pick. And I'm so pleasantly surprised when they pick something like, I should hold it up, The Last House on the Street. Such a great book. If you haven't read it, and I'm sure everybody probably has on this live stream, but please pick it up if you haven't. So you have written so many amazing reads, and many people have asked me, like to ask you, how do you come up with your ideas for these books?
It's not easy. I'm struggling right now to come up with the idea for the next book. Usually something will just trigger an idea for me. And with The Last House on the Street, I actually had 2 ideas for 2 totally separate novels, which if you've read the book, you can sort of see that.
Yeah.
The first idea I had was I was thinking of a therapist. I used to be a therapist. So I was thinking of a psychotherapist who's in her office and a person comes in and tells her that she wants to murder somebody. And then what does the therapist do with that? So my significant other said, you've written about too many therapists. Don't make her a therapist. So that's where my mind goes all the time. So I decided she would be an architect. And if you've read the book, you know then what happens in the first chapter. A strange woman comes in and tells her many things that that the character Kayla doesn't understand how she could possibly know. And one of the things she does mention is that she wants to kill somebody.
Right.
So that is that idea. But then I started getting a whole other idea, which was what if I wrote about the SCOPE program? And the SCOPE program was a program in the mid-60s that brought mostly Northern college students into the South to help register Black voters. So then I started thinking of a character, Ellie, who is 20 years old and a student at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And what if she got involved in this group, but she's a Southerner, so she's not really accepted by the other students. And she's definitely not trusted by the Black folks that she is trying to help. So these are the 2 completely different ideas that I had. And gradually, their stories come together in the course of the book.
Well, you sort of answered the questions I had for the next couple of questions.
We're done.
Number one, I mean, there's so many books that are competing for our attention these days. And, you really do have to be grabbed, as you know, better than anybody in that first prologue or first chapter. And when I picked up this book, I have to say that first chapter wasn't a prologue. It was chapter number 1. Kayla, is approached by this woman in her office. And you're just like, what is going on? I mean, it gripped me from the get-go. And so I did want to ask you, and you just probably answered it, but, did you have that thought out? Because if you don't grab people, as you know, in the first chapter, you're not going to grab them at all. And you really grabbed everybody with that Kayla scene with this woman coming in, knowing who her daughter is, and you're like, what's going on here? I mean, I was gripped from the beginning.
Well, I'm glad. And as a reader, I need to be gripped from the beginning. There's so many books out there, and if I'm not grabbed, I'm going to put it down. So that is something that I keep in mind. And it's also when I'm coming up with my idea, I want something that grabs me right in the beginning to write about. I also knew that Ellie's story was going to have a slower start. And so I felt like I needed to start with Kayla's and jump right in with Kayla's story, and then take a little more time as I developed Ellie's story.
Did you know anything about architecture?
Not a thing. I still don't. What I knew the kind of house that I wanted Kayla and her husband to be building. I knew it was sort of inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright, and that it would be a glorious house and a house that they'd been dreaming about forever. But in terms of the actual building of the house, I didn't need to know that, fortunately, except that there was an accident during it. But I did, do a lot of looking online for their house, for a house that looked like theirs, so that I could describe it, and this big open concept inside with all of the glass windows that would totally freak me out living in the woods like she was, especially if she's getting all these threatening messages. So I could imagine, as Kayla did, moving into that house, and at night you realize you're just completely exposed to the world and you want curtains. So she ordered $1 zillion worth of curtains. I could relate to that.
So a couple of people are asking, and I was going to ask you this as well. I had never heard about the SCOPE program before. Had you heard about it? How did you hear about it? Why did you want to bring that to light?
Yeah, most people haven't heard of the SCOPE program, and it's just a little bit of a fluke that I knew about it. When I was a teenager, I was very tuned into civil rights because the town that I grew up in was approximately half Black and half white. And so every day I was, facing my fellow students and realizing that they just did not have the same advantages that I had. And it was during the era of, the mid 60s, during the era of Martin Luther King and that pacifist movement. And I would find myself in the library going through the stacks very often. I had a great history teacher, and I discovered that I was really good at writing papers, and that finally I knew how to get A's. So I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I spent a lot of time in the library. And in one of those times in the library, I came across something called SCOPE, which is the Southern Community Organization and Political Education Group. And again, it's a group that would come in from the North and try to register Black voters who had a very, very difficult time in those years registering to vote. They were threatened, they were forced to take literacy tests, etc. So I was fascinated by this group, and I wrote a paper about it and read up on it. And so it came back to me when I was thinking about writing about the 60s. And I found a book written by a woman named Maria Gittin. The book is called This Bright Light of Ours. And Maria was a 19-year-old SCOPE worker. So she wrote a book about her experiences and about the SCOPE program in general. It was hugely helpful to me as I wrote. And I spoke with Maria, and we communicated back and forth. So the thing that stands out to me in listening to her talk about her experiences and reading the book was how young these students were, and how even though they were driven to do this work from their good hearts, they were still 19 and 20 years old and wanted to have a good time. So they made mistakes, and that helped me understand what Ellie would be like,
Right.
and that she would make mistakes in her judgment, and in the choices that she made. So that's where Scope came from and why I wrote about it.
So how difficult is it to write, from two different timelines like that?
Well, it's definitely a challenge. It's not just the timeline, but it's the character. You need to separate these people and know very well what each person is like. And so, what I do, even though I kind of know the general story of each of them, I write each one separately.
Oh, you do?
So,
Okay.
yeah, I honestly don't remember. I think I wrote Ellie's story first and Kayla's story second.
Hmm.
And an important part of having these dual timelines is keeping their voices separate. You
Right.
don't want them to start sounding like each other. So that's another reason I usually do write more than one point of view. And it's another reason why I write them separately, so that the characters sound just like themselves. And the other thing I did with this book is I made Kayla's present tense
Right.
and Ellie's past tense. So it hopefully I have the names of the characters as the heading for each chapter, but
Yeah.
hopefully you could pick up the book and know who you're reading about by the sound of their voice and by the just the way their story is going, as well as past and present tense.
Oh, no, it was very easy to know what
Good.
storyline. But I wanted to ask, so I read an interview with you that you said you were 14 in 1964 when news broke that 3 civil rights workers had been murdered in Mississippi. So how did that impact you? You remembered that after so many years had gone by, correct?
Right. Yeah, that it was huge news back then. And a lot of people from that era still remember their names. And 2 of them were white men, young men, and one was a black man. And they were brutally murdered by Klans members. And that, I think, was my first wake up call to what civil rights meant. I mean,
Right.
I'd heard the term bantied around, but I was only 14. And again, because of where I was going to school and where I was growing up, suddenly I saw my classmates in a different way and began to understand what obstacles they had in their lives that I didn't have. So that has just always stuck with me, and just the idea that people who were not much older than me could do that kind of work.
Mhm.
I knew it was something I would never have the guts to do, but uh, that's another reason why I wanted to write Ellie's story, because since I would never have the guts to do that, it's kind of fun and rewarding to put myself in the shoes of somebody who would do it and imagine what that's like.
So a lot of people have asked what character, and myself included, what character was the hardest to bring to life? Was it Ellie's brother, Brenda, Reed? Was there a character that you found a little bit harder than the rest to try to wrap your head around and bring to life?
I would say Mama.
Oh,
And if there's people who haven't read the book, I don't want to give too much away.
that's
But
okay.
Mama's not a nice person.
Right.
And when I started writing the book, I really didn't know that.
Mm,
Mama's one of the characters. This is Ellie's mother.
hmm.
One of the characters who emerged as I wrote. She said things I didn't expect
Right.
and behaved in a way that I didn't expect.
Hmm.
And I have learned just to go with my characters when they are not what I expected, because I figure they know better than I do who they are.
Right.
And so she was challenging for me, because I had to kind of figure her out
Hmm.
And if you've read the book, you know how she turned out.
That's interesting. I did not expect you to say that actually. I mean, all the characters were so interesting. I mean, it was it's just such a great read. Anyway, lots of people want to know, and myself included again, what do you hope readers take away from this book? You know, your fans. You've written so many books. I mean, now this one, The Last House on the Street. I mean, what do you hope your audience takes away from
Well,
this one?
first and foremost, I want them to have a good time reading the book and be entertained.
Right.
But I wouldn't mind if they took away the realization that we are still dealing with this problem of impediments for people of color to be able to vote.
Mm.
And I've gotten some. I write about that in my author's notes, and I've gotten some protests from people who don't agree with me about that. But I really hope that people would do a little research into what the problems are now and understand that we're still dealing with that it's not a level playing field.
So I'm just reading some comments from people that are watching. Michelle Harris says, "Would the dual timeline be difficult for a movie?" I don't know if if this is going to be a movie,
Yeah.
if you sold the movie rights, but does that play? Is that a factor when you're trying to turn something into a movie? The dual timeline.
Well, I'm not a movie producer, so I'm not sure about that. However, I do think that movie people can be so creative and can find a way. I challenge you movie people, find a way to make this into a movie, because that is true, that when you've got these dual timelines and you've got Ellie at two different ages, that it certainly that can be a challenge, but I'm certain that the right person could do a good job with it.
And so, of course, everybody wants to know, what are you working on next?
I'm not sure. I don't want to talk about my seedling of an idea yet because it's not fully formed, and I'm not sure where I'm going to go with it. But I do have a little seedling that I am watering and nurturing every day.
And another question that came up, it's coming up a lot right now. What authors inspire you? What are you reading? What have been your favorite books, authors of the past couple of years?
Oh my gosh. Well, I always wait with bated breath for Chris Bojalian's next book, and it's coming out, I think, in May. So I'm very excited about that. I'm reading Ellen Marie Wiseman's next book, which is coming out. It might be May too. It might be April. Sorry about that. I'm not sure when, but I highly recommend it. It's called The Lost Girls of Willowbrook. And last night I was up till 3 a.m., which is very unusual for me. I try not to do that, but I just did not want to put it down.
Very good.
Yes. So I read really widely from all different kinds of authors, and I don't really have, except for Chris, I don't really have an author that I say, that is my favorite author, because sometimes I love one book but not the next book. So I just see what my friends are recommending, as most people do, and dive in. But I have to be caught right away, as I mentioned.
So somebody's asking, and you probably don't have a favorite, but of all the books you've written, have you had a favorite of those books? Is there something that keeps popping into your head all the time after all these?
I love so many of them. I mean, really love them and love my people. But my third novel, which was called Secret Lives, and which came out a long, long, long time ago, will always be the book of my heart. Because I figured out what I was doing. I always recommend that people do not read my first two novels. I look at them and I can hear where I was reading Alice Hoffman or where I was reading Ann
Right.
Tyler, Ann Rivers Siddons, because it's their voices that are coming through. There
Yeah.
was no Diane Chamberlain voice at that time. But with my third novel, Secret Lives, suddenly I had
It
a
came to
voice,
life. Yeah.
and I understood how to add suspense to a story and how to make it deeper.
Yeah.
So that book will always kind of be a favorite.
Hmm. So I wasn't going to ask you, but I mean, can you tell us a little bit about your background? I mean, when did you start? When was your first book published? I don't
Mm.
even know.
Well, my background was I have a master's degree in social work.
Hmm.
So I had a story in my mind from when I was a young teenager. And the story was that my girlfriends and I would live together at a big house at the New Jersey shore, and we would live with Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney and James Brown.
Oh,
And
Springsteen? Okay.
well, it was way before Springsteen.
Okay.
Springsteen would have been 15. So I would nurture that story in bed at night, like many young authors to be do. And as I got older, gradually my girlfriends and I turned into real female characters, and my rock stars turned into real male characters. So that by the time I was in my early 30s, I was still playing with this idea in my head, but I'd written none of it down. And then I had a doctor's appointment, and the doctor was keeping me waiting. And I had a pad and a pen, and I just started writing some of those scenes down that had been in my head for so many years.
Wow.
And I got really, really hooked on writing. And I treated it as a hobby. But I took a night class, and the first night, the professor said, "I assume you all want to be published." So it sort of shifted my thinking, and I became obsessed with writing. And so gradually I shrank my social work hours and increased my writing hours. And in 1989, my first novel was published.
That's
Do not
amazing.
read it.
Don't read it. Only read the third novel on, right? So do you try to aim for a novel every 2 years, or do you have a goal?
Well, I've been doing pretty much a novel a year.
A year. Okay.
I have 28, and it's been since
Wow.
1989. So, but I did take a break this year. I just took a year off and goofed off and did jigsaw puzzles and played my guitar and just sort of relaxed. And now I'm bored and ready to get back at it.
Was that due to the pandemic, or just you just felt like
I just felt like it's time to take a
break?
year off. And
Yeah.
I had tremendous support from my agent, my editor. So, yeah, I think that was a good idea.
So yeah, so I mean, this falls in line with my question. I was going to ask, what do you love to do when you're not writing? Because I always like to ask authors that. What do you do for fun? What do you do to,
Right now, I'm fixing up our beach condo. And so that's been fun. I've been doing it with my stepdaughter. And I'm a little tired of jigsaw puzzles.
Okay.
And then I do play the guitar, not well, but I play the guitar for fun with a guitar group every week. We
Right.
get together. So that's really enjoyable.
And so with your writing process, when you are writing, not this past year when you're taking a break, but normally do you get up at a certain time and make sure you write X number of hours a day, or you don't do that?
Yeah. In the beginning, let's say I have a year. For the first 6 months, I'm doing research and just plotting out a story. And then I start writing. And the closer I get to deadline, the more I write. So probably that last month, I do get up right away and start writing, and I don't stop until I go to bed.
Right.
But if I did that from the start, I would probably have a much more relaxed last month of my contract. But that's my process. Very undisciplined.
And so, as I was talking to you earlier about the girlfriend newsletter and the girlfriend book club, we're all about free female friendship. That's a big part of what we're about. So when, you and your girlfriends, what do you do when you see your best friends, what do you guys like to do?
Talk
Are
about
they also
books.
writers? Or are they in awe of you?
We talk about books and writing. We talk about some regular girl stuff, but mostly my friends are mostly
You're
writers.
writers. Yeah.
And so that's what we talk about.
Yeah. So I'm
It's
reading these.
wonderful.
That's great. I'm reading these comments, and they're all from our audience, and people are saying it feels to me that we are going backwards on so many fronts, the women's rights and various things. We are definitely going backwards. Gerrymandering and voter suppression is still happening. We need to get people get out the vote. I mean, there's a lot of negative negativity on here about how the state of the world. They love your book, but they're just commenting on the state of the world. So, what would you say to all these people that say, or hopefully maybe your book will help? I hope so.
Well, we all have to find a way to make our voices and our concerns heard.
Yeah, and just getting away from that. Do you use pen and paper, type, or dictate when you're writing? That's a nice question.
I don't dictate, and I often start out with pen and paper and move to the computer as my mind starts going faster. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and when that started in the 90s, I did dictate 2 books because my hands completely, I couldn't type at all. It's before the really good medications came along, so it was very painful to type. So I was really glad to have voice recognition back then, but I haven't needed it, knock on wood, in many years.
So again, finally, I know we're about out of time, but you said a lot of people are saying, what's the timeliness? When is your next book coming out? But I guess they're saying this year. I don't think it's going to be this year. In the next year or two.
Yeah, it'll be at least a year or two.
A year or two. Okay. So lots of people want to know what you're doing next. So that's a good sign, right?
Yes, that is.
So for everybody who hasn't gotten it, this was our March book club pick, The Last House on the Street by Diane Chamberlain. I think the 40,000 members of the book club, many of them have gotten it, but if you haven't, please do get the book. Just a reminder before we say goodbye to Diane Chamberlain that our April book is The Maid, and the author Anita Prost will be joining us on April the 19th at 7:30 p.m. So I'm really excited about that. Our May book is Yellow Wife, and the author will be joining us May 17th at 8 p.m. And then in June, we have The Guncle. And I don't know, we haven't lined up the author yet for that book club discussion, but we will. So that's very exciting. And also, I just wanted to say, finally, that be sure to come onto the Girlfriend Book Club page tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. because we've got a very special book giveaway that we're doing and that I'll be posting at 10 a.m. So don't miss out on that. And just finally, everybody's just saying thank you. Great story. Diane, they love the book. And they're just like over the moods about your book. That's all I can really say. So any final thoughts from you?
No, but I'm just really grateful that people have nominated this book and that I got to be here to talk with you all.
No, it's wonderful. Like I said, I am always amazed when because I never know what the 40,000 people are going to choose. And then when they choose the book and I just read it and I think, wow, this was like one of the best books I've ever read in my life. So
Thank you.
It's wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us tonight and have a great evening. And everybody come on to the book club page tomorrow morning for our next book giveaway at 10 a.m. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.